Good afternoon and welcome to another client conversation with MCL Construction. I'm Travis Justice, and we have a fun conversation coming up with you over the next half hour as we're going to visit with Kyle Peterson, the CEO and chairman of Colliers Omaha. But before we get into that conversation, I want to remind you that you can follow MCL Construction on social media. You're watching us right now on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Facebook at MCL Construction, also on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all the great social media channels, and of course at mclconstruction.com. A little bit about MCL Construction. For many businesses, we understand that navigating that entire construction process and knowing who to trust can be a bit overwhelming. We, meaning our people, like to simplify that process by listening, planning, and executing, continuing that relationship to build your vision. Today's client conversation with Kyle Peterson, chairman and CEO of Colliers Omaha. Actually started with Colliers back in 2005, named president and CEO back in 2013. A couple changes within the organization, and they've recently relocated their offices from Exarban Village to a brand new office. We'll get into that. And of course, many of you will know Kyle as a ESPN baseball analyst, and he joins us right now. Kyle, good to have you along, my friend.
Hi, buddy. Happy Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
It is, and we're smart because we're inside because it's hot outside. It's really, really hot.
Yeah, it is. Not too many people would call us smart very often, but at least for this very moment, we are.
You know, full disclosure, Kyle and I go back. Are you ready? I was thinking about this when I stopped by your house the other night. You and I have known each other almost 30 years. Does that seem possible?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been 95.
Yeah, I think so. I was a sports director at KPTM Fox 42 at the time, and I think you had just finished maybe your freshman year at Stanford. You pitched in the World Series, and I get this phone call. It's like, hey, it's Kyle Peterson. I'm looking for an internship, and I'm like, okay, I guess we can do that. Your career did much better than mine did, by the way.
Well, yeah, I still remember you sent me out with a camera to go shoot high school football highlights, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had to ask how the camera worked, everything else. Needless to say that nothing that I shot that night was actually used on the nightly news. But man, I loved it. Those were fun times, and I appreciate you saying yes.
We'll get into the broadcast career a little bit later on. But you retired from baseball because you were the first round pick of the Milwaukee Brewers back in '97. You retired from baseball in 2003, and you end up in commercial real estate. Take me through that journey. What attracted you to commercial real estate? What was it about the profession you're in right now that maybe gave you that drive?
Well, I mean, when I got done, I started working for ESPN right away. So 03 did super regionals. It was the first year there were super regionals. I actually did College World Series, did some major league stuff, did that for a few years. And then quite honestly, our coverage of collegiate baseball changed pretty significantly. And our coverage of Major League Baseball changed significantly. And so there just wasn't as much stuff to do. There was no ESPNU, no SEC network, no ACC network. They didn't exist. And I needed to find something that was in addition to that. So came back and met as many people as I could on about a 5-day trip. And ultimately, at the time, Jay Noddle was the chairman of our firm, which then was Pacific Realty. And it was a good fit. I had no background in it. Got in as a broker starting out and made all the idiot moves that most brokers do starting out. And thankfully, they never told me to leave. And now 16 years ago, it would take a few of them to tell me to leave now. So it makes it a little bit easier if they want me to leave, or a little bit tougher if they want me to leave.
Colliers Broker of the Year in 2009. What was that learning curve? I mean, you go from Stanford to professional baseball. You get right into the booth of the broadcasting. What was the learning curve? Who was, besides Jay, any other mentors that really helped you out as you were starting a new career?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, Jay had gone full-time over to Noddle. So he was starting to run Noddle full-time. Scott Hyder was the president of it was Grubb & Ellis Pacific Realty at that time. And really, it was a few guys. Scott was one. Scott was one when I got in that really just allowed me to go along with what he was doing and learn from kind of standing in the corner and see exactly what it was and the things that, well, at the end of the day, the things that you needed to know that you don't know when you come in. A second was a guy named Alan Murrow. And Alan, over time, ended up going back to Noddle and now just kind of does some stuff on his own, but was and is really a brilliant investment broker. And I saw the way that he just understood the math of deals and how you put deals together. And so I walked up to him one day in the office and said, hey, I want to do what you do, but I don't know how to do it. and I'll do whatever you want me to do on any deal. You don't have to pay me, but just let me understand how it works. And a few days later, he walked in with a box that was about this by this and dropped it on my desk and said, "This is a building down in Lincoln that we're going to be selling. There's all the leases. There's everything you need to know. Let me know when you've had a chance to go through it." And there's that moment where you're like, okay, what did I really just ask to do? But it forced you to learn it. It forced you to learn how you value a building, what the value of leases are, why certain deals make sense, why, it sounds pretty basic, but why longer term deals are valued differently than shorter term deals. Why credit matters when somebody's coming in to look at a property. This particular building was a building in downtown Lincoln that sat on 3 different parcels of land. Now, it's a building in downtown Lincoln. It's not big as far as the width and the size of the building, but yet there was 2 different leased parcels of land and one piece that was actually owned by the owner. And I remember I went back to Alan when I went through everything, and I said, don't take this the wrong way, but who in the world's going to buy this thing? And he said, well, we only need one. And we found one. And it was just the start of this kind of twofold approach initially from college real estate to the leasing side, and then ultimately, you met my dog a few days ago.
I met your dog. Yeah, I did. See, if you don't believe this is live, folks, we just proved that it is. This is absolutely live.
So that's actually his second appearance on television. He made it onto SEC Now the other day when we were live. It worked out really well. But it kind of ended up, okay, the 2 areas that I liked the most and made the most sense were primarily office leasing and investment sales. And so you try to learn as much as you can about that. And then over time, you try to learn a little bit more about the business as a whole. And what are the other things that we do, not just in brokerage. And it's been a really good spot. But honestly, Trav walked into it with essentially no background knowledge of the industry, just was fortunate to be surrounded by people that A, were open to sharing things, but B, really knew their stuff.
Did you view yourself as a salesman, or how did you view yourself when you first started? And do you view yourself as a salesman now?
I gotta hope not. I think that we all realize when somebody's trying to sell something to you. And what I quickly found out is when that's the case, then ultimately you don't get as much done. When you really know your stuff and can have just a conversation, and when ultimately you're comfortable if the answer on the other side is no, when you're comfortable telling someone, I don't think you should do that deal, and this is why, and not just consistently trying to push things, because I try to look at it as if I were the person across the table from me, is this a deal that I would do? And if the answer is yes, then hopefully it turns you away from salesman and it turns you into somebody that's just having a discussion about whatever that is, whether it's an investment deal or a lease deal or somebody that's growing their business, or sometimes trying to make a tough decision as to shrinking and subleasing and all the things that go along with business. So yes, obviously at the end of the day, it is sales. But hopefully it's not taken as sales on the other side. It's taken more as, I don't know, counsel, advice, discussion, and something that ideally I wouldn't encourage you to do if I wouldn't do it myself.
I equate it on my end as being a guide, right? And you're right. If you know what you're talking about, you guide somebody through that process, because if you're a guide, then that equals relationship, and it's more a relationship than it is sales, should we say?
Well, and I think it's similar to TV, right? Like I don't get nervous or uncomfortable on TV if I feel like I'm totally prepared. Now, it doesn't mean that the starting pitcher that you prepared for the last 5 days may go out and throw 4 pitches and his arm hurts, he comes out, and now it's a bullpen day and now you're scrambling. But at least going into it, you feel like, okay, I'm prepared. I know my stuff. I think it's the same thing when you're in sales or any type of it, to where if you feel like you're prepared from a knowledge of the industry to the client that you're trying to have the discussion with, to the things that you've been through in your business career, I think it does make it more like that. It makes it more like you're guiding someone as opposed to you talking. That one of the best, a few things. It's Nada, when I started, there was 3 things he said. He's like, in this business, you better do the math in your head, outwork the guy next to you, and know when to shut your mouth. Because ultimately you can talk yourself out of a deal if you've already talked yourself into it. If they said yes, don't give them any reason to say no. If you've already got them to that point, you already won. And I think it's, a quick knows better than a long maybe, understanding the things that from a client standpoint and really from a time management standpoint that deserve a significant amount of time and attention, and those that really don't make sense. And the only way you figure that out is by getting it wrong.
If you guys have a question for Kyle, you can just put it in the comment section on whether you're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, even YouTube. Go ahead and send us some comments. And if you have a question for Kyle, we can ask that. Now, a couple of years ago, you guys had somewhat of an ownership change with Colliers Omaha, right? So take me through that ownership change, what you guys wanted to accomplish with that, and we'll get into your new office building that you recently moved into.
Yeah, I think with any growth and maturation process of a company, then ultimately there's you would hope that there's people that are building from below you, and there's people that are coming up and at some point deserve a chance to really have a say in the movement of the business, not necessarily in just driving revenue. Jay started our business upwards of 30 years ago and had transitioned really full time over into Nottle, and then a few other guys that had been there, and I think one in particular that maybe wanted to step back a little bit. It just gave us a good opportunity for those of us that were kind of, Mike Potoff as our president and a few others that jumped in from a partnership standpoint. And I think anybody, if you're running a company and if you're ultimately responsible for the bottom line, you'd kind of like to have some of that bottom line, you'd like to have the freedom to make decisions and not necessarily walk down the hall and say, hey, what do you think? And those guys always gave me the freedom to do that, really. There wasn't too many times that I had to go down and have the discussions. But now it's those of us that are really active in the day-to-day component of what our business is that have the equity of it. And it was a smooth process. I know sometimes those really aren't, but ours was. And I think everybody was trying to accomplish the same thing.
Now, you guys recently moved into a new office building, relocating from Exarban Village. I believe you purchased the building yourself, right? So you guys own the building. Am I correct?
Yeah, with a partnership, but yeah.
Yeah. So what were you thinking? Here's some of the interior shots of your new office building, and we'll just share these. What did you want for your employees as you relocated and then giving your employees an office space to work in?
That whole time was interesting because when we started the process, the COVID was not really a component of it. Right. So when we started having the discussion about buying the building and then as we're starting to design it, and then COVID becomes a part of it. And as we're starting to build it, obviously, because I think we moved in maybe the 1st of March or so. And so, this is getting built out in the midst of when a lot of our people are not even back at the office at our former offices in Exarban. And what we originally wanted to do, and really what we ended up doing, is just having an environment that people feel comfortable in. And, our old kind of break room, lunchroom was pretty boring, and we wanted to create an environment to where people wanted to eat there. They were comfortable and had a few different opportunities to do it. We wanted higher ceilings. We didn't drop ceilings in a lot of the areas of the building. Opens it up, does create a little bit more sound. I think that was the one surprise when we got into it afterwards, but it also creates a lot more light. But the other thing is we wanted to have windows all over the place. Our previous offices was really easy for people to kind of hide. And there's times that you need to have those conversations. Believe me, I'm the same as many others that do. But there's enough side lights in there that when you're walking by, you can see people. I think it creates more of an interactive environment, which is what we wanted to have. To where our departments, which are engineering, accounting, property management, and brokerage, and then our marketing department, all has the ability to really interact pretty consistently. So we, in large part, because of the help that you guys provided, I think we've created that, and we've created an office environment that people are really comfortable in.
So we're looking at your break room right now, or your lunchroom. Do I see two beer kegs back there? Do I see 2 taps back there?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of things that I was really vocal about during the course of this process, but those are 2 things that I was vocal about that we were going to have. And it's, like for instance, the other day, one of our accountants had been with us full time here locally, and then family was moving but wanted to stay with us, and she worked remotely for a while, and then thought about, well, maybe I want to come back. So was back for a few months, and then made the decision it's probably better to work remotely. 3:00 on a Friday is Katie's last day, at least in person, and I walk out, and the whole accounting department's pouring beers and hanging out in the office, and it's not like nobody's shotgunning beers at 11:30 on a Tuesday, or at least I haven't seen it yet. But it's just kind of fun and nice, and if it's an environment. There's a golden tee machine in there that you'll see people playing every once in a while. And we wanted it. Work is stressful enough anyway. I mean, life is stressful enough anyway. And the last thing that we wanted to do is create an environment that created more stress in anybody's life. And hopefully it's one that when you go in there, it's light and you don't feel comfortable. Like you're not looking at your watch saying, all right, it's 4:30. When does it turn 5 o'clock? Because I just feel like those environments they ultimately don't lend itself, A, to free thought, to people that are comfortable really challenging each other and having discussions, but B, you don't want to be there. And if you don't want to be there, it's never going to be the best work output for anybody.
How about your conference room here? You got it looks spacious, got some good AV capabilities. Do you still find yourself using a conference room on a regular basis?
Some. I mean, what we found on our old space is the way that it was designed is we had a larger conference room that literally was only there for sales meetings, and that was it. And we have sales meetings every 2 weeks. We're fortunate in the building that we're in now that Silverstone has a large room downstairs that we can use every 2 weeks for sales meetings. Really, aside from that, we didn't have environments to where more than 6 to 8 people were getting in the same place. So as we were looking at this and trying to save space, we said, well, we don't really need a conference room that's bigger than something that seats 8 at the table and maybe a few more on the outside if you need it. There's a few other breakout rooms throughout, but it's funny. Like, I mean, we're in the business of theoretically relocating people to other offices or whatever it may be. And then when you start to do it yourself, it's a pretty good test of what you're telling other people. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? For instance, I mean, I've got clients coming to the office this afternoon to start the discussion about what they want to do in their next space by sitting in our space and by walking around it and saying, okay, we did this because of this. And here's the area that we left the ceiling open, and here's the area that we dropped it. And those are really healthy conversations to have in your own spot, because during the course of it, I think you've learned this is the stuff that has worked really well for us. If we had to do it all over again, like if I had to do it all over again, I'd add a sink right next to where the second coffee maker is. That was my screw up. I didn't think about it at the time, and it's way minimal in the course of all the things that go into it. But this has become already a sales advantage for us. Amber Gustafson, who's our design consultant with Colliers, we brought her on kind of twofold. One, for this project, but two, because she's got a really rare skill set in our business to be able to, within a brokerage company, provide services like this to other companies. So she'll sit in on this meeting today. She's got 2 others today with 2 other clients. And this is kind of her canvas that she can show people, hey, it doesn't need to look like this, but here's the reasons that we did this. And I think it's a decent starting point.
Well, you bring that in, you can kind of answer the question I was going to ask, but here's another shot of part of your office building, but where you got the high ceilings, exposed ceilings, you've got some woodwork down the hallway, but you also have the branding. A lot of people, and we just recently moved into our new headquarters about a year ago, and we have more branding now than we've ever had before. But you're right. When you bring clients in or people who are interested in using your services, it does make a big impression. But I think it does wonders too, just for your own employees, right? They feel like they belong to something. They belong to something hip and happening, pretty cool.
A small thing, right? And this was Amber. Like there's a wall that it's really not small, but there's a wall that has, I don't know, kind of those Andy Warhol like pictures of all of our employees, to where you can kind of see the like you can tell that I'm bald on it, but you can't really see all the facial stuff. And it became, at the beginning, it kind of became a game. Like, who's that? Well, it's all of our employees in one place. So when you, to that point of feeling like you're a part of it, if anybody walks in, it's right outside my office. And anybody walks by it, you see it. One of the most boring things when you go in a real estate department or a real estate office is you got to display your licenses somewhere. Well, we did it in a different way to where they're kind of suspended and hanging through glass, and it looks a little bit more artistic than the ones that were in, $2 Michaels frames that were sitting back in the copy room at the other place. And it's just like that Colliers sign that when you had that last shot up that showed the pictures, that was the exterior signage on our Exarban building. And Amber was looking at it and said, wouldn't it be cool if we took the exterior signage and just brought it inside and made it a part of what our new building is? It's not lit like the other, but it walks by, it gives you a little understanding of where you've been, becomes a different talking point. So yeah, it's fun, man. It's fun. It's not necessarily, you also realize during the course of it that the act of moving isn't fun. That
No.
part is not enjoyable. But when you get in and when it's done and you realize the positive things that it does associated with your business, then it's great.
Let's turn to the business side of things now, because there's you guys are just finishing up the LinkedIn building over on in Sterling Ridge. We just finished the Centris Federal Credit building over there. Yeah. There's a lot of office space right now. What does Omaha look like as far as office space? What's the inventory look like? Do you think the demand will come back, or are we in a too big of a surplus? What's your professional opinion on this?
Well, I mean, there's definitely more now than there was a few years ago. I mean, for instance, I was looking at something the other day for North Park, or the submarket that North Park is in, and that vacancy rate right now is pretty close to 20%.
Wow.
If you go back 2 years to the day, it was like 8.5. And I think there's similar stories to that around town. Now, the advantage that Omaha has is historically it has not been a significant spec office build environment. There's not that many people that have built spec office, and the most recent, aside from the new R&R building, but the two that Sizek did at 180th and Dodge filled up pretty quick. It's not totally full, but it's close. And really, the next one was the 200,000 or 180,000 square feet that R&R did a little bit further out. You've got Valmont leaving upwards of 60,000 feet in their former headquarters. So now there's more Class A space coming on the market than there has been before. I think the biggest question, and this is what I'm sure you guys have from a construction standpoint, and what we really have, is how do people occupy office space, period, moving forward? And I think some of it's industry-based. If you're in more of a sales, we want back and forth culture organization, you want people together as much as you possibly can. There's other organizations that's maybe not quite as important. Other areas of the country that look at it very differently than we do here. And I wish I knew the answer to the question that you just asked, as far as I don't know what it looks like, because, whereas before the question was, okay, our office is going to get more dense and less dense, but that office of more dense, less dense was, are we going to need to build a park at 4 per thousand, or do we need to build a park at 5 or 6 per thousand? I think now the question is, do people go to work or do they stay home? And those are two huge differences, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the first one is they may take a little bit more, may take a little bit less. The second one is if they were in 50,000, they may need 5. Those are really, really big dynamic shifts as far as demand. Supply is not going to be an issue. Demand is going to be the question as to ultimately how people want to occupy office space. We just don't know yet.
It's funny you say that. Do people want to go to work? Because I have my brother-in-law works at Union Pacific. He wants to go to work. Right. There are people who don't want to go to work. I mean, they want to work from home. I'm probably old school. I'm Gen X, right? So I want to come physically to the office. I feel much more productive when I'm in the office. So, but I understand. I look at my kids, and I have some in their 20s. They're like, yeah, I can work from home. That's not a problem. So it's going to be interesting, but over a long period of time, right? It's a new idea now with a year in, maybe a year and a half in. In 2 years, is the productivity going to stay the same? But I also worry about people interacting with colleagues and make sure they have that social interaction, because that's a big part of work. It's
a big part of life.
Yes.
And I remember when my father retired for the first time. He wasn't very good at retiring, but it was what he missed was that. I mean, what he missed was people. What he missed was interaction. What he missed was counsel of talking to people about, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I missed it. I mean, throughout all of this, there was 5 or 6 of us that, I mean, we came in every day.
I
mean, we didn't force our people to do that. Ultimately gave them the opportunity to do what they wanted. Here's the other thing, Trav, and I'll make a TV comparison too. I was doing games, sitting right here, and Will Morrow sitting right here, but was doing games from Seoul, South Korea at 2:00 in the morning from my house. And you know what? It worked. And because it worked, then I'm going to be doing games from home a lot more for the rest of my career. Well, working from home in many cases worked. And for many different businesses, I think you look at it and go, okay, well, we're making really good money. Our people are happy. Is it the way that it used to be? No, but wasn't that long ago that we didn't have cell phones, so stuff changed. And if this is the new, then you just kind of figure out exactly how everybody fits into the new. It's when you look at it, it is a dynamic shift because it was so quick. But hell, I mean, this is the way that life works. It never stays the same.
Rarely do you really know when a paradigm shift happens.
Yeah.
I think we know where a paradigm shift happened, and especially you mentioned TV. I do a radio show every day in Des Moines for iHeartMedia, and I've been doing that at home in my basement since 2011. So when this all happened, I'm like, oh, you can work at home. I've been doing studio stuff for a long, long time, right? So it is possible. We got about 5 minutes left, and this is probably the longest interview you've ever done just about commercial real estate, isn't it?
That's just fine.
but let's talk a little baseball. You're getting ready to head to the Little League World Series. What do you like about the Little League World Series? And also, I want you to talk about that Field of Dreams game that's coming up tomorrow night in Dyersville, Iowa, and what that means for Major League Baseball to really pull on those heartstrings of a cornfield stadium and coming out of the corn for that.
Yeah, you as an Iowa boy. I mean, is that the first Major League game that's ever been played in Iowa?
First Major League game ever in Iowa. It's funny, and I said this. To me, there are 6 teams that are blacked out in Iowa. Can you believe that? Iowa has the worst blackout rules when it comes to Major League Baseball. And they actually took some billboards out for Rob Manfred and said, "Hey, end the blackout rules. We can't watch Major League Baseball here." But I said
they should end all of them anyway. But that's a different discussion.
But to me, baseball looks at ways of growing the game. They can talk about shortening the game and pitch clocks and stuff like that. I think stuff like this, and when they played at the College World Series a couple years ago, that grows the game. That gets people interested in it. Yeah,
100%. I mean, I think that we saw it here, right? And I think it helped that the Royals were here. And in this case, you got a Chicago team that, Iowa is probably like Nebraska, to where you're split between the Chicagos and the Twins and the Royals and the Cardinals and whoever else. But when you bring it to people as opposed to them having to go find it, I think then they go find it more after that. I mean, you bring, especially, I mean, Yankees are coming to town. I mean, that's different. I've seen it at the Little League World Series. I'll see it again in a week and a half when the Little League Classic comes in, and just to see, in that case, to see the look on the kids. And I hope that that's the case this year. I don't know how much the kids are going to be interact with the players like it has before, but to your question about Little League, it's no different than the College World Series or really anything that we did in life that was taken away over the last year. You just realize how much you miss it when it's not there. And when we didn't have the College World Series last year, it was the same thing. When we didn't have Little League, and the first year I did the Little League World Series was 2003. So I haven't done it consistently, but I think it's the 16th year that I'll be in Williamsport.
Wow.
And it really is pure. I mean, as kind of cliche and dorky as that sounds, it is. But you got these kids that are, I mean, Scott Brown, the pitching coach from Vanderbilt, his son was on the mound last night for the team from Tennessee. They won, and they're going to Little League World Series. And I'm texting back and forth. Scott Brown won 2 national titles, played for another one this year. Got to sit in the stands. Wasn't one of the coaches. Got to sit in the stands, watch his son throw a complete game last night. Now we'll see Nolan Brown at the Little League World Series in a week. And he's texting me going, okay, should I stay at this hotel or that hotel? Does this one have a pool? Because I got my 2 daughters. I want to make sure we've got a pool. And I don't know. Everybody gets to be a kid again. And it's going to be different. There'll be a few fans. I think it's 3,000 or 4,000 this year, so it won't fill the hill. But no different than we were with the College World Series this year. We'll take it any way we can get it.
Before we let you go, a quick reminder that you can follow social media or MCL Construction on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. And if you haven't visited our website, please do so at mclconstruction.com. Kyle, always a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate you giving me a half hour of your time. I know you're a busy guy, but your new office looks great. Your business is doing great. And just congratulations again on all your success and what you got coming up.
Thanks for answering the phone almost 30 years ago, buddy. I appreciate it.
And a little secret, because I do that radio show in Des Moines, I take credit for your career all the time. All the time, I take credit for your career.
As you should. I give you credit for my entire career, so it works good both ways.
All right, Kyle. Appreciate your time. Thanks for watching this client conversation. We'll be back in another month with another conversation on leadership, growth, and all that's going on in the Omaha metropolitan area. We'll talk to you next time on the MCL Construction Client Conversation.